struggle with.
Yes.
And what we call it, I've been trying to plug the soul apart.
Yes, I know. It's a very difficult issue and a very disputed issue. And Augustine, I guess it has a wonderful quote that I have here. Let me give it to you now. Augustine, reflecting on all these things about the body and the soul, says as follows: the way in which spirits are united with bodies is altogether marvelous and cannot be understood by man. Yet, this unity of body and soul is man himself. And so Augustine found it to be a practical mystery that we can't solve. Aquinas didn't look on it that way. Aquinas felt it was very important to be able to define the intellectual functions of the brain elevated by the soul, to go beyond any function the brain could have, and therefore to be an argument for the immateriality of the soul. And it's but you know, there's no question it's a very disputed thing. But what is the importance of that dispute? Well, the importance of the dispute is, as I have in one of the first of these things, as a question I want to ask later, and maybe I'll ask now: does Christianity stand or fall on the spirituality and immortality of the soul? Here we're going to get into the great importance of the factor and between the two. And where you get, fundamentally, I think you get theology coming into conflict with science. And theologically, it's very important because this doctrine of the immateriality and eternity of the soul is a defined doctrine of the church. Not only defined once, but twice. That really happened. What is a defined doctrine of the church? Someone want to tell me? What is a defined doctrine of the church? How does it differ from other doctrines of the church? Okay. The church, on very rare occasions, defines a doctrine of the church to say, it's usually because it's just like councils. Councils are held because of great disputes, and oftentimes they will define a doctrine. Now, Vatican Council II decided not to define any doctrines. Okay? Once the doctrine is defined, it means that the church, and not just the church, but you know, at the end of every conciliar document, the complete document, it says, "We," meaning all the cardinals and pope assembled, and the Holy Spirit decree. Just like if you read in Acts, at the end of the first council, the Council of Jerusalem, where Peter and Paul and others were arguing over whether you had to be circumcised and follow the food laws. At the end of their decision there, it says, "We and the Holy Spirit have decided." So behind the defined doctrine is the Holy Spirit saying these things. And therefore we really get to look at this issue from a very special point of view. And it creates a kind of problem for Catholics. And that is that the two councils have defined this doctrine. Two, not just one. And the church is very reticent to define the doctrine. They deliberately do not define most doctrines because they're wary of doing it. So if you keep that in mind, it's amazing that councils have defined this doctrine twice. Let me read it to you. The first council was the Council of Vienna in 1312. And it says, "Whoever shall obstinately presume to assert, define, or hold that the rational or intellective soul is not the form of the human body in itself, and essentially must be regarded as a heretic." There's the defined doctrine. Second, this doctrine is reasserted by the Lateran Council number 5 in 1512. And it says, with the approval of this Holy Council, we condemn and reject all who assert that the intellectual soul is mortal, or is one in all men. At that time, this notion, pantheistic notion that there was one world soul in which everybody participated. That's what they're arguing against. And those who cast doubt on these truths, since the soul is not only truly in itself and essentially the form of the human body, as was defined by the canon of Pope Clement and the Council of Vienna, but it is also multiple according to the multitude of bodies into which it is infused, multiplied, and to be multiplied, which is saying everyone has his own soul. There is not a soul.
So, Aquinas seemed to talk about the terms the soul and the mind kind of interchangeably, as if they were the same thing. But when you're talking about the different...
No, I'm not sure that's true.
I'm sorry, Augustine.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Augustine, yes.
Yeah.
Augustine, he does. Thomas quotes Augustine on a number of accounts, but he does not agree on a number of things.
When we talk about, I'm sorry, I meant Augustine. When we talk about Aquinas, the levels kind of implicate a more intricate relationship between soul and mind, but they still seem related, and it seems kind of preserved in the two defined doctrines that you just read. So what would you say are the relationship between mind and soul, according to Aquinas?
Aquinas would say that the mind gets its knowledge from the senses and acts on it, and at certain levels, like the 3 levels I just mentioned to you, that the mind produces certain things, but then there is a function of the soul which he describes as elevating the mind, elevating things to a higher level, like elevating acts to acts of free will, to acts of conscience. So he maintains that one of the functions of the soul is to elevate the knowledge of the body. He puts great emphasis on the fact that knowledge begins with sense knowledge. But then the soul can lift that sense knowledge to a higher, more intellectual level that is a level of immateriality, and that happens only through the function of the soul. So that's what he puts his emphasis on, and where he distinguishes his view from that of Augustine.
And why is immateriality necessary for that to be the case?
Because that's part of the argument for the eternity, is both the spirituality and the eternity of the soul. That which is immaterial can be eternal, that which is material cannot.
So that's the Cartesian dualism that's coming into play.
The Cartesian dualism? I'd be reluctant to say that. Descartes has a kind of different view from Aquinas about this.
How so?
Well, he has great doubt about the functions.
But he has the essential split, which begins this whole thing between body and mind.
Well,
this is where it starts.
Thomas is splitting them only by saying that you begin with the mind, and then building on what the mind has done, the soul elevates it beyond that.
I mean, getting the soul out of the body is Cartesian. Getting the soul out of the body is Cartesian. This initial split.
Yes, Thomas does not have that big split. They are related, they're very much related. Right? Because he says, he's a big exponent that the only knowledge that we have comes as a beginning from the senses and then builds on that. So he has that the life that the soul brings is elevated.
It's the elevated part that
is the elevation of the soul. It's not a separation at all. In fact, Thomas has wonderful things to say about the separation. Maybe we have to get into this now. What Thomas says is that he draws a distinction between the soul and other spirits. Okay? What other spirits are there? Is God a spirit? You're not sure. No, you don't want to say God is a spirit, is that right? Of course God is a spirit.
Yeah.
Are the angels spirits? Yes, of course, they have no body. They're all spirits. So the nature of a spirit is one thing, but the soul is a very special kind of spirit in Tom's view. It's a soul. It's a spirit that has a function of vivifying or giving life to the body. Okay? In scholastic philosophy, you have matter and form. The soul is the form of the body, meaning that it is the source of life for the body. So he always puts them both together and relates them as very closely related. So much so that when they get separated, when does the soul get separated from the body? Death. So in death, it's separated. And when that happens, the soul gets some wonderful gains, but also some losses, because the completion and perfection of the soul depends also upon the body. So therefore, what happens? Well, we start getting into stuff I want to do next time. The soul and the body are reunited. Okay? Now, for next class, I'm asking you to read 1 Corinthians 15, where Paul refers to something called the spiritual body. That sounds like a contradiction in terms, right? Spiritual body. What is a spiritual body? Well, I'm going to leave that question hanging there. I'll deal with that next class, and I ask you to read 1 Corinthians 15 so we can assess that. But going back to my basic point here is that Thomas is always looking at this relationship as very close. So close that when you separate the body from the soul, it suffers. Okay? And therefore, it is put together later.
So would the distinction then be that Descartes might say that the soul, such as it is, the mind, you could sit in total physical stillness, and the mind could have its own activity without any need for sensory input, that it could think on its own without requiring sights or sounds or whatever, and Aquinas would reject that idea, that there cannot be any activity of the mind and soul without the body.
Without sense. Thomas puts enormous emphasis on beginning knowledge and sensory knowledge. But that the soul enables the body to go well beyond just sensory knowledge.
I don't want to get us sidetracked, but I'm curious if you can go back to the first defined doctrine.
Okay.
And if I heard correctly, it posits or it claims that the rational mind is an essential part of the human being. That you cannot have a human being without a rational mind.
Yep.
Is that fair?
Yes. Soul and body are intimately a union.
Right.
That point that I made in the first class, that when you get the Judeo-Christian beliefs, the fundamental belief is that it is a unity. In fact, it is such a tight unity that we don't even sense a consciousness of the soul. Okay? Which is a point I won't get into later, I should get into now. It is a very strange thing. It's one of the arguments that the Enlightenment people use against the existence of the soul. You know, if you say we have a hand, we have a foot, we have a brain, we have eyes, you can detect all those things through the senses. But if you say you have a soul, we're not even conscious of it. Right? We don't even have a consciousness that we have a soul. How do we derive the knowledge that we have a soul? We derive it from philosophy and theology, from reason and faith. We don't derive it from sense knowledge of the existence of the soul. So to prove the existence of the soul, you must go about it in a way different than just self-knowledge.
I guess one of the things that seems problematic about the defined doctrine is that there are people in the world who are profoundly mentally ill, whose thought process